Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm glad that you all can hear me. I apologize for being tardy. I'm in the board office and the devices are just running extremely slowly on this connection. So it seems like we invest more in school devices than we do in our board office, which is completely okay because that's where everything needs to be. But I hope that everyone is doing well.
Commissioner Fadden, do you want me to bring you a hotspot? I have one.
You may need to because the actual laptops aren't, they're not working right now.
Okay, yeah.
But I hope everyone's doing okay. Commissioner Roberts, good afternoon. Commissioner Griffin, good afternoon to you. And is Commissioner Sykes with us?
Looks like not yet.
Okay. And I'm going to ask Commissioner Roberts and Commissioner Griffin if we could, just for maybe 5 minutes after the meeting, just stay behind for a couple of moments, if that's okay with you all. Great. We're going to get started with our English learner update.
Great.
We've got some high stakes things to talk about today, so I'm very excited. And I look forward to the presentations that everyone's going to make today.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner McFadden. Good afternoon, commissioners and public. We are super excited to be here today to talk with you about our English learner update, to really think about the progress and opportunities that we have in play to support our English learners, as well as the team has done some amazing work to develop a strategic plan in listening to stakeholders. So talking to teachers, talking to students, talking to families. So this is an opportunity for them to share some of that work with you as well. And then finally, to think about what the work with the ELs has looked like over COVID and what are next steps that the team is taking there. So I will introduce our Director of Differentiated Learning, Laura Ohanian. I forgot to introduce myself and say I'm Janice Lane, the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. And thank you for your time today. We have the presentation and then we'll have a space for some questions or feedback at that point. So Laura, I will turn to you.
Great. And let me introduce Maria Riamore, who is also here and will be co-presenting with me. So as Jenny said, I'm Laura Ohanian, I'm Director of Differentiated Learning, and Maria is the coordinator of ESOL, so I'll turn it over to her in a minute. So the objectives today are to understand the progress and opportunities to support English learners, the role we play, understand the key elements of the City Schools Multilingual Community and English Learner draft strategic plan that we are working on, and understand the district's response to COVID-19 to support our ELs. Go to the next slide. So our vision, and this is, in this, we have some of our stuff is still draft because we are in the process of soliciting feedback from the public, and this is part of our feedback. So our new draft vision, which is posted and is public, is that City Schools welcomes multilingual families in our school communities and ensures English learners attain multilingual literacy, meet or exceed rigorous academic standards, and are prepared for college and career readiness. And you'll notice here that we have separated out our multilingual communities and our English learners, though of course it's a Venn diagram, there is an overlap. So some of our parents and families that require linguistic support also have students who are English learners, but some of them don't have kids who are English learners. So we wanted to be very clear that it's a bifurcated strategy and it's in collaboration with the engagement office. All right, we'll go to the next slide. Our guiding principles to support our multilingual community English learners are that language and cultural resources that students and families bring are tremendous assets to their learning and our school communities. English learners can achieve at high levels with the right expectations and supports, and all educators are responsible for the language development of English learners. Let's go to the next slide. I am not going to spend a lot of time here, though this is quite a busy slide, and it's really one of the only really busy slides because I wanted you to be able to see an overview of the draft plan at a glance. And you can see we have the communication engagement, staffing and recruitment, high quality instruction, dual language opportunities, foundational literacy and pre-K2 and ELs, differentiated support for high impact schools, and supporting secondary ELs. And it's really important for you to understand that this is still in draft. Like I said, we're still soliciting feedback, but we did quite a bit of engagement to even get to this point. And this is just in planning. So we're going to share, and as we go through the presentation, we'll present data, and then we'll talk about a couple of the goals that relate back to that data, and give a little bit more detail on those goals. All right, next slide, please. Baltimore is a multilingual community with at least 14% of our families at home speaking a language other than English, and I predict it's probably a little higher than that. And as you can see, the country of birth outside the US, there's quite a few, and you can notice that a lot of them are Central and South America, mostly Central America, but we are seeing an increased population from Africa. And the languages spoken in the homes, non-English, #1 is Spanish, and then we start to see Arabic, Swahili, French. And the reason you see sort of this really diverse, like Wolof and Nepali, is because we are also a refugee resettlement center. So we see a lot of families that are resettled as refugees, along with some of our traditional families who are immigrating to the United States. On the next slide. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Maria.
Good afternoon. Where we start to pick up here is looking at where our ESOL-based schools, or our school-based ESOL staffing has grown, and it has almost doubled in the past 6 years. We've seen a 90% increase in our staffing, and you can see in the first figure how that breaks down over our different positions that we use to support schools, and in the second figure you can see what the annual growth has been year on year, as well as that 90% figure that I just referenced. Next slide. In order to maintain those staffing levels and ensure that we are getting the staff that we need in these positions, we have a number of recruitment strategies. We have partnered with the Human Capital Office. They have added a number of specific recruiting events at schools that specifically have ESOL certification programs. That's in addition to all our active recruiting at local universities, through professional organizations, as well as our work to expand conditional certifications, and most recently adding a program, a partnership with J1 Alliance Abroad, which looks at international teachers, and they provide all the support for bringing those teachers. Next slide. So our staffing and the data piece that Laura talked about reflect directly on goals 1 and 2 of our draft plan. The first being communication and engagement, and the second staffing and recruitment. Both, as you can see, do require a systemic shift. For communication and engagement, specifically, it's going to mean an increased investment in the systems to support these multilingual communities. Staffing and recruitment, we need to start looking at how to prioritize language skills in jobs and schools where there is a significant multilingual community or where the instructional model necessitates that. Next slide. English learners represent almost 10% of our students. And what the map on the side there shows you is they are everywhere. We typically think of our English learners as being concentrated in certain parts of the city, and certainly the map does show there are higher concentrations in some areas, but we have students all over the city who are English learners and are currently at 9.6%, which is up from 9.2 last school year. Next slide. You can see our growth of enrollment, the growth of our enrollment of ELs from 2011. Specifically, a 61% increase in the last 5 years. And although our growth plateaued a bit this year with the pandemic and virtual learning and everything that brought, we did still see a slight increase, again, from 9.2 to 9.6% in our number of English learners in Baltimore City. Next slide. Similar to prior years, we have 14 schools that represent 56% of the district's total enrollment. It's the same schools that we have seen in prior years, and you can see those listed on the side. However, I also want to draw your attention to the chart on the other side of the slide, because what this underscores is that while we have 14 schools that have these high populations of English learners, there are also a number of schools that, while they have low numbers of ELs, do have English learners. At the bottom of the chart there, you can see there are 61 schools that have 10 or fewer ELs. So we're still working, we still have to work to support those students and those families. Next slide. ELs consistently have higher attendance rates than Never ELs. This runs through last year's attendance file, which did end early because of the pandemic, but you can see over the last several years that has consistently been the case for our exited ELs as well as our current ELs. Next slide. Our population is also very new to language learning, new to the country. We have a significant number of first-time test takers on our annual language assessment. And what that means is that they're brand new to the country and brand new to learning English in our schools. As a result, our English learners in Baltimore begin at a lower language proficiency than their peers across the state. And you can see that represented in the slide when you look at that blue bar for Baltimore, and we have a much higher number of students. Next slide. 47% of our English learners achieved their growth target. This is for the SY 18-19 data. We do not have it for 19-20 as the state did not do the calculations. We are working internally to look at that data. Next slide. We do see that we have a much higher percentage of ELs who are hitting their growth targets in those early grades. Students exit EL status with an access score of 4.5 or higher, and we see the highest numbers of students hitting that score in grades 4 and 5. This is consistent with state data. Where we deviate a bit from what we see across the rest of the state is that Baltimore does see a significant influx of ELs entering in high school as brand new students, brand new to the country, learning English. And as a result, we start off with a number of high school students who have lower language proficiencies. Next slide. So we're going to take a moment to look at a couple things around instruction and professional development, specifically our curriculum updates, our Title I ESOL EA initiative, and then a little bit of detail about professional development. Next slide. We did do a curriculum update in a prior board meeting as we're in our current cycle for curriculum approval. We've had significant updates to elementary and secondary curriculum in order to align to core content, as well as adding newcomer programming, sheltered content, academic language courses. Again, you can find that the link is there for the ESOL curriculum review that was already previously presented. We have made a number of adjustments for this school year in response to the pandemic, specifically adding a number of online platforms to support language learning, particularly around oral language, which has been difficult to work with in the virtual setting, as well as creating videos and supplemental materials for our newcomer students, our earliest learners. Next slide. Professional development, we have three areas where we have focused. Systemic professional development, systemic professional learning, where our focus has been on comprehensible input and student language production. Again, really doubling down and focusing on that oral language development, as that has been a challenge during the pandemic. We have monthly professional learning, again, same topic, comprehensible input and oral language proficiency. Monthly professional learning has a couple of different has slightly different audience in that we're trying to target not just our ESOL teachers here, but our content teachers, school administrators, pretty much anybody who touches an EL. We also have a number of professional learning communities. We have 2 different bi-weekly PLCs. And again, we're really trying to look at how we can respond and best support our students in the virtual platforms and with their oral language, especially since that has continued to be a struggle. One of the adjustments that we have made for this school year was an e-learning tip sheet for working with English learners, and then again, focusing that professional development very specifically on the needs during virtual instruction. Next slide. Here you can see what I just referenced a moment ago about our professional development focus around comprehensible input and student productive language. So really trying to hone in on how we make things accessible for English learners during virtual learning and ensuring that we're meeting their needs to the best of our ability using our online and virtual platforms. This document has really been our focus, and we have worked in all our professional learning settings to support administrators, school staff members, content teachers, ESOL teachers, everybody on how they can use these tools and these supports to increase our English, or to increase our support to our English learners. Next slide. Our Title I ESOL EA, Educational Associate Initiative, this actually started during the SY 19-20 school year, and we've continued it into this school year. The program focuses on Title I schools with an enrollment of 30% or more English learners. Each school that meets that criteria in our pre-K to 8s has an educational associate that is funded through Title I at the district level. They are supervised by the ESOL office, and they are responsible for coaching ESOL and content teachers, professional development, working with families, really providing all those supports for the English learners and the multilingual community, in addition to what we see through our ESOL instruction. In addition to the position, there were additional supports that were added, including professional learning for the EA provided by the ESOL office, stipend hours to each school for school-based planning, and supplemental materials funding. The schools that are listed are there on the side. One of note that is not listed is John Rura. John Rura has been receiving these supports this year despite not having been a Title I school last year. They are now again, and they have been receiving these supports throughout the entire process. We have again had to make some adjustments in order to better meet school and staff needs for the pandemic virtual learning. Specifically, we've adjusted our professional development and our PLC to meet bi-weekly so that we can provide more focused support on planning and coaching for our teams. Okay, next slide. This brings us to our next two goals, goals 3 and 4, high quality instruction for ELs and dual language opportunities. Again, there's a systemic shift that needs to occur in order for these two goals to really come to fruition. For high quality instruction for ELs, we really have to look at prioritizing the time for training and professional learning for all leaders and all educators. Dual language opportunities, this really requires us to expand the programs that we have with an initial focus on Spanish to benefit all our students and to support our English learners. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Laura.
Okay. And I'll try to wrap up pretty quickly so we have a little time for questions. I know we started late. So Baltimore has fewer long-term ELs. That's defined by the state as 6+ years of receiving ESOL service than the rest of the state. We look at this data because we know our exited ELs are doing actually quite well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But we want to know, are they exiting service when they're supposed to? And it looks like that looks pretty good on our end. When we looked at our long-term ELs, which is part of our strategy that I'll talk about, 32% were receiving special education, which is higher than the percentage of overall ELs, and 60% were enrolled in just 10 schools. So that gives us a focus area, 4 of which are part of our Title I initiative, which means they're 30% or more EL. And you can see below the comparison. Go to the next slide. Our exited ELs are showing higher graduation rates and lower dropout rates than their Never EL or current EL peers. Our ELs, however, have much lower graduation rates and much higher dropout rates than their peers, but we did notice an improvement in both of those this year. I'm not sure what we're going to see next year because we know that the pandemic is impacting this population quite dramatically, and you'll see more about that in the OI presentation, and I'll talk more about the supports we're putting in place, but we were happy to see this improvement. If we keep going. EL students with interrupted schooling are less likely to graduate and more likely to drop out. So as we look at our ELs and say, what are some of the causes for this, higher dropout rate, much lower graduation rate, is we're looking at students who have had major gaps in their instruction, who have come to us at an older age, like Maria mentioned. And what we're finding is that those students are much more likely to be the ones that drop out and have lower graduation rates than those who come without interruption. So if they had schooling and they come to us and they're just an EL without any interruption in schooling, we're less likely to see them. I can go to the next slide. We have, in 2018, we opened our Multilingual Enrollment and Support Center. We've at this point supported thousands of families through that. We support enrollment choice and transfer. We have an updated reevaluation choice process for our recently arrived students. We do foreign transcript analysis and credit assignments. We have direct placement into entrance criteria schools. We have a partnership with our social work office where we have social work support for the family that we identify upon enrollment. We make connections for the family with community-based organization. We have bilingual staff to support the families. In the office almost every day, we have both French and Spanish speakers. We definitely have Spanish speakers. We also have French most days. And then participation in district events includes the Choice Fair, Back to School Night, and International Night. Keep going. The school choice and reevaluation process. This is really focused on our recently arrived rising 6th and 9th graders. And in past years, we have looked at a specialized testing process for them that takes into account their language needs and provides additional sort of linguistic support so they can access the content of the assessments. However, this year, since we didn't use assessments, that wasn't necessary. We did look at using more recent data for them in the process of reevaluation. So that was the adjusted reevaluation process for this year. Okay, keep going. So I'm going to go through the last 3 goals. So the first one is our foundational literacy and pre-K2 for ELs. We know that foundational literacy development for our youngest ELs looks a little different, and it also looks different for a general educator who has ELs in their classroom. So we want to enhance our co-teaching and align professional learning and resources for general educators and ESOL teachers. Differentiated support for our high impact schools serving K. Those are schools that have 20% or more ELs. We want to refine the Title I initiative and the goals that we discussed. However, we want to put systems in place and really put an emphasis on our ELs exiting between 4th and 5th grade, which we know we're doing a pretty good job on, but we want to even improve more. And then supporting our secondary ELs. We talked a little bit about the challenges, especially if they come with interrupted schooling older. And so supporting secondary ELs and that systemic shift and having a strategy that specifically addresses that. Go to the next slide. So we're really excited. We've been sharing this with teachers and school communities. Communications is going to share this out, but you can feel free to go to this link where the plan is. It's both in English and Spanish. And then we have a feedback survey that is both in English and Spanish. And if you have any questions, you can email the ESOL office. I'm going to one more slide, I think. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about our COVID response. So, you know, we knew that our students were one of the most impacted, if not, I would argue, the most impacted population. You know, virtual learning for students who don't speak English, whose parents may not speak English, and trying to support them has not shown to be very effective for these students. So we started very early on trying to get ELs in person. We started last summer. As most of you know, I also oversee summer. So last summer we had 6 in-person programs. We tried to prioritize bringing ELs in. Quarter 1, we had 11 classrooms. We added an additional 6 classrooms quarter 2. And then of course, ELs are able to enroll now with quarter 3. And we've worked really hard to identify and have our families opt in because we know this is really the best setting for their students is to be in person. Keep going. So how did we support it? We helped draft a plan to begin in-person EL programming. We hosted information sessions for interested teachers and principals. And up until, you know, recently, it was mostly volunteers and our teachers recognized like the need that our students had. Supported teachers with scheduling, classroom readiness, procurement of PPE, and all the necessary supports, collaborated with members of the in-person working and learning task force to help develop cohorting guidance and develop professional development related to in-person learning and cohorting. Keep going. We've in the past always had a summer program, and I'll be doing a presentation on summer programming in May, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but we've always had a credit recovery or original credit program for ELs. We'll be expanding those for high school, for middle school. We're going to be focused on social emotional learning and academic mentoring within the middle school programs. And then for elementary, we're looking at some very specialized elementary program for our ELs this summer. Go to the next. After an analysis of the early warning indicators and survey results from students and staff and families, we realized that we really needed to target a more comprehensive approach. And so we looked at 3 really focus areas for our work, specifically to address our students and the impact of COVID. So that included providing additional professional development to school administrators and teachers, comprehensive communication and dissemination of a strategy to ensure that materials and technology are in the hands of students, and a collaboration with Dr. Warren and her office with attendance and engagement in the unique needs of our ELs and our multilingual families. Let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to actually spend any time on this because we had an updated access protocol. However, we just received very recently, an update from the state on access. And so we'll probably be coming back with an update for the public on how we'll administer access. Initial identification, we use an updated Council of Great City Schools screener, which was the state of Maryland adopted. And like I said, there will be an updated annual assessment, formative assessments. We are, as the students are coming back in person, we're able to administer the WIDA model online assessment for the first time. That will give us a real-time reading, writing, listening, speaking scores for proficiency for students, which allows us to do real-time instructional adjustments. We also still do our quarterly writing assessments and quarterly speaking assessment. Next. All right, so I'm gonna just open it up to questions.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for the presentation. I'm going to encourage my board colleagues to make any comments or ask any questions as they see fit. Commissioner Griffin, Commissioner Roberts.
Thank you so much for the presentation. While I don't have any questions, I did want to highlight slide number 33 with the inclusion of the social, emotional, and academic mentoring. I know there's been so much discussion around social and emotional, the intentionality around social and emotional supports as our students are coming back in the building. So I definitely wanted to highlight that for the, and I know you didn't talk about it too much, and so we'll be looking forward to seeing that in May, but I wanted to highlight that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just trying to meet the time requirement.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, and in a meeting like today, it is packed with a lot of information. So I'd certainly appreciate your time, the energy from the team, and certainly as we move forward with next year's calendar, just making sure that we're a bit more thoughtful in the way that we just schedule things so that we can really take some time to go in to a lot of the great work that's happening, but also to become more aware of some of the challenges that we're experiencing so that we as the board know how to best support the district and the system as we move forward. So with that, what is the team most proud of? And I think these might become some standing questions that I ask, departments, but as we look, and certainly we're in a pandemic and things are different and things are going to be different for a while. But with this update, what are we most proud of as a school system and as a school district with this growing population? And then what are some significant challenges that you may have highlighted based on what I heard in the presentation, but what are some challenges that we need to just keep our eyes on so that we can best support the work of this particular area within the system? And it doesn't have to be lengthy, but just, those two things, I'd be very eager for the committee to hear those things.
I think I'll just try to be brief and let Maria jump in if she'd like to, or if she agrees or not. We tend to agree, but we'll see on this one. So what we're most proud of, I think what I'm most proud of is our teachers, our staff, and how they've wrapped around the kids during this pandemic. Even though we are not seeing the sort of academic performance, we're seeing attendance lower than we've ever seen with our ELs. We're going to see grades lower than we've ever seen, but I see teachers and staff supporting kids in ways that make me really proud to be able to support in this role and support them in their work. You know, to me, it's kind of heartbreaking that our kids are going to lose a lot of them, a lot of instruction. So that, I think, is what I'm most proud of. And our leadership team, Maria, you know, Kieran is here, Tina is here, they're on the leadership team, but we have our Title I EAs, our EAs, and they're just supporting each other and partnering. We wouldn't be where we are without that. And I think the second thing I'm most proud of is our exited ELs and like the way they're just knocking it out of the park. Once we can get them to the language proficiency, they are just growing in an amazing way. I think the challenges I mentioned, the pandemic and virtual learning has been really challenging for our kids. We find they are not logging in as much as their peers. When they log in, they're sometimes like kind of hiding out. Like Maria mentioned, the oral language development, you can imagine like our teaching and our instruction, we do really great work, right? With especially our teachers and our staff in schools, they do amazing work with kids. But a lot of the English they learn is from their peers too, being in school, being in that inclusive English speaking environment, and they're not now. And so, you know, this is our biggest challenge. And then I think another challenge, and I hate calling it a challenge, is the unique needs of our secondary students. They come into us, some of them coming in 17, 18 years old, sometimes never being in school. Sometimes we're teaching them how to use a pencil and read and write. And then we have how many years, maybe 2, 3 to graduate them. It's a very difficult challenge. And we're going to step up to it, but that's just being fully transparent. Maria, I don't know if you have anything you'd want to add to that.
I think you nailed the challenges. The one thing I would add that I'm extremely proud of is not just our teachers, because frankly, I'm in awe of how they have tackled everything that has been thrown at them over the last 12 months, but how that mindset they have managed to convey to their students and their families as well. That the circumstances are difficult and the platforms have changed, but your children still matter, and we will do the best we possibly can by them. And I think the families get that. That's coming across in our engagement sessions that we're having with parents. And so I'm very proud of that too, that's something parents are feeling.
That's wonderful. I'm sorry, I was going to jump in.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
It's wonderful to hear both thoughtful analysis of the challenges and the triumphs, you know, the glows and the grows that you all have seen. And listening to your presentation, and thank you so much for such a thorough presentation. Like, I really appreciated how even the data was laid out. I am curious in thinking about how, since we know we have students spread across the city, and we have like some schools that have a smaller concentration and some with a larger concentration, and then we're thinking about students coming back, in what ways can differentiation be used at different schools to prepare teachers to receive students back who may not have logged in maybe once or twice during the pandemic, but also maybe a small population in their school? Like, I'm thinking about those schools in particular, because sometimes those are the supports that may fall through the cracks, or the students that get kind of forgotten about, unfortunately, because it's such a small population at those schools. So I'm curious about what exactly that kind of support looks like in those areas.
So we have our ESOL EAs, and they support schools, and they can provide professional development directly to the schools. So they have like a network of it's not a huge network of schools. They have a small network of schools. They work with the ESOL teacher, but they can work with the general educators and provide direct PD. Our EL strategy is really speaking to this. And I should say I'm very proud of the strategic plan we've developed. That's taken a lot of work. That's almost a year in progress. I didn't mean to miss over that, but when you asked me what I'm most proud of, that's what I was most proud of. But I'm also proud of our strategic plan. But in that, we're trying to address some of that. I will say what's really interesting, Commissioner Griffin, is we didn't put if you allowed me, I would have 700 slides. So they would cut me down to this many, which is still a ton. But in one of the slides that we actually took out was really interesting was we didn't see like EL performance. We looked at it by impact, which is what you're talking about, low, medium, and high. And we didn't see a trend based on low, medium, and high. What we saw was a trend based on specific schools. So what's very clear to us, because I thought we would see that, which is why we analyzed it in that way. What's clear to us is we have to do work in certain schools and provide professional development in certain schools, if that makes sense.
Yes, that does. That is really good information to know. And I'm glad that, you know, it's been looked at, like, what is the impact in different ways? How are we analyzing this data? How are our students doing based on where they attend, but also the density of population of EL students in those areas? Yeah.
Thank you all. And certainly we'll look forward to more information in the future. And as we continue to keep our minds focused on recovery, acceleration, remediation, just moving our young people from brilliant, right, to even more brilliant, right? Because that's where we are. I appreciate the work of the team, and I know that the committee does. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to shift to the teacher and principal pipelines update. Very eager to hear this update. I'm not sure who is starting out the presentation. There are several names that are here. So
I am. Are we okay to get started?
Absolutely.
All right.
Hey, Sarah.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Sarah Deal. I'm the Executive Director of Recruitment and Staffing in the Human Capital Office, and I'm here with a few of my colleagues who will be introducing themselves as the presentation unfolds to provide you with an update on teacher and leadership pipelines. So for very brief context, we share an update on teacher and principal pipelines with the Teaching and Learning Committee twice annually. Sometimes we dive deeply into one specific program or partnership. Our last teacher focus update featured urban teachers, for example, but sometimes we provide a more holistic update on teacher and principal pipelines more broadly. So today we're going to provide an update on different kinds of pipelines. So for the presentation on teachers, we'll primarily focus on 3 pipelines, our alt route partners, which for this purpose means the route or pathway in which they entered the district. We'll share how they complement our broader placement strategy, how they've adjusted their support in light of COVID-19, and we're going to feature one highlight from each program regarding their efforts to diversify their teachers. And then we're then going to turn it over to the talent and organizational development team, who will dive more deeply into some of their school leadership induction and development work and the extensive principal pipeline work that they've been doing with the Wallace Foundation. So now I'd like to introduce and turn it over to Diane Sellers, our Director of Recruitment and Selection, who works most closely with our alt route programs to share the highlights for the teacher pipeline work.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. So Maryland is a state that is an importer of teachers, which means that our colleges and universities prepare approximately half the number of new teachers that are needed by the state annually. So we employ a variety of strategies to recruit a diverse pool of high-quality teachers. This slide shows the number of teachers we have hired each year since 2013 and the pathway through which they entered the district. Today, I'm going to focus this discussion on Baltimore City Teaching Residency, or BCTR, Teach for America, or TFA, and urban teachers. BCTR, TFA, and UT are important components of our teacher hiring strategy. In January 2021, for the full board's January 12th meeting, the Human Capital Office presented its written interim impact report. And among other highlights, it showed that the number of schools opening fully staffed went from 96 in 2018 to 133, which is 80% in 2020. Meanwhile, we had fewer first-day teacher vacancies in 2019 than any prior year on record. And then we cut that number again in half in 2020 when we opened with more than a 99% first-day fill rate. We achieved this in partnership with many teacher preparation programs, including these 3 pipelines that I'm going to talk to you about today. Next slide, please. City Schools has partnered with teacher pipeline organizations for nearly 30 years, and our 3 current partners, as I mentioned, are BCTR, Teach for America, and Urban Teachers. We recognize that different teacher preparation routes and different specific programs appeal to different people and meet their needs. So we believe it's important that we have access to a range of types of programs. This slide shows the number of teachers we hired for each organization this year, as well as our placement strategy. So for BCTR, for this current school year, we hired 90 plus teachers, and we leveraged concentration of poverty funds to place and support the cohort of teachers and also to recruit for their 21-22 cohort. For Teach for America, we hired 90 plus teachers for this school year, and we leveraged Title I and concentration of poverty funds to place and support 75% of the cohort in Title I schools and 25% in high schools with concentration of poverty. And for urban teachers, we hired 80 plus teachers for this school year, and we increased the centrally funded resident teachers from 65 to 75 with a total of 110 resident teachers for this upcoming school year. I want to highlight that Urban Teachers is the only Maryland approved teacher residency program, and we believe a full year teacher residency option is an important part of our teacher preparation portfolio. Therefore, we're excited that we have grown the program with UT every year for 10 years. We will bring a contract proposal to the board this spring to continue that expansion with a goal of reaching a new milestone in August 2022 with more than 100 UT residents becoming first year teachers as part of the same cohort. Next slide, please. We do rely on these 3 alternate route partners to provide teachers in high need content areas such as special education, math, and ESOL. And on this slide, you can see a breakdown of the positions that teachers from each of the cohort are currently teaching in. And again, this is just the first year group of teachers. Next slide. Each of the pipelines supports with diversifying our teaching force in a number of areas. We want diverse teachers in all the ways that people are diverse, and we specifically want even more Black teachers and teachers of color. While our Black teacher recruitment and retention working group made recommendations that we're carrying forward, other core aspects of our team's work already and separate from those supplemental recommendations are focused on the same goal. Our work with these alternative certification partners is an important part of this work. So I want to walk you through some demographic information for each of the pipelines cohorts, as well as a highlight for each. For BCTR, 52% of their first year teachers identify as Black or African American, and 77% are native to Maryland. Next slide, please. Over the years, BCTR identified that some of the candidates who were accepted into their program were unable to matriculate largely due to finances. Their cohort members are not paid over the course of the summer while they're training. This disproportionately impacted Black candidates. So in response, BCTR started the Black Educator Excellence cohort in order to recruit and retain Black candidates who are accepted into BCTR. The features of the cohort include the following: up to $4,000 through a need-based stipend, testing support if needed, retention funds, as well as a tailored cohort experience. This was the first year that BCTR implemented this strategy, and so they have anecdotal data, but no quantitative data at this time, but they will have quantitative data at the end of the school year, and so we will share that information as we receive it. Next slide, please. For TFA, 47% identify as a person of color. Within that, 10% identify as Latinx, and 35% of their cohort are Pell Grant recipients, which is an indicator of socioeconomic background. Next slide. Teach for America Baltimore was included in a recent NCTQ report on teacher prep programs. The report examined teacher preparation programs nationally, examining both traditional and alternate route programs, and examined 2 critical issues: the academic standards for admission into teacher preparation programs, as well as the program's contribution to teacher diversity. Teach for America Baltimore was listed as one of 261 programs in the country that received an A in both of those 2 focused areas. Next slide. For urban teachers, 58% of their cohort identify as a person of color, with 37% who identify as Black or African American. 43% of their cohort are Maryland residents, and 43% were Pell Grant recipients. Next slide. So urban teachers recently received a seed grant from the U.S. Department of Education. It's a $4.3 million grant, and they will kick off their pilot in the spring, so between this month and next month. And it will span across 3 years and gradually involve all of the UT participants. The purpose is to accelerate the social emotional learning and academic achievement of students by providing meaningful, relevant, and replicable professional development and support to their educators. Next slide. Given our current context, our partners have had to adjust their approach to supporting their cohort members, and here are just a few examples of how they shifted support. So VCTR made all of their certification coursework virtual, and they also adjusted their coaching model so that coaches and teachers are able to engage virtually. They are able to do what's called earbud coaching virtually, where their coach is able to watch what the teacher is doing, and the teacher has an earbud in their ear, and the coach is able to give direct feedback, and that can happen virtually. Teach for America also shifted so that all of their certification coursework is virtual, and they also adjusted their coaching model so that teachers and coaches are able to engage virtually as well. They made all of their professional development virtual for the year, and they leveraged TFA alumni, teachers, and school leaders to present sessions to cohort members on best practices for teaching in the virtual setting. And urban teachers, for their residents and for their teachers, they shifted from a more prescribed program of coaching and activities to one that is more flexible based on what the coach feels the participant needs, and the participant has also expressed as they need. So they include more coach select and self-select coaching options, and they've also become more flexible in their scheduling to respond to school schedules, timelines, and needs. Next slide. Each of the programs that I've discussed today are examples of Maryland approved alternative preparation programs, or MAPs. We've already begun to relaunch the PSRP to Teacher program, and we're exploring the possibility of applying to MSDE to put a new MAP in place to support PSRPs who are or may become interested in becoming teachers. And as we have additional information about this, we will share that. At this time, I will turn things over to Ashley Stewart, Executive Director of Talent and Organizational Development.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, everybody. Can someone let me know if you can hear me?
Yes.
Anybody? Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ashley Stewart. I serve as Executive Director of Talent and Organizational Development within Human Capital. It's great to be with you all this afternoon. I'm joined by my colleague, Tracy Frazier, who I'll introduce in a moment. I want to start off our conversation this afternoon just by sort of centering on a new term that we have decided to use around our principal development work, which is equity-centered principles. And you see the definition there, that is that principles who are equity-centered consistently demonstrate the passion, skill, and persistence required to create the conditions necessary to eliminate the predictability of outcomes by race for students, staff, and families. Part of this shift in helping to fortify our principles, whether it's people who are aspiring principals or people who are new in their tenure through the Educator Pipelines Induction Team, is to anchor all of our work in our race equity policy, and to ensure that the ways in which we are helping to build capacity of our school leaders is aligned with helping them to eliminate the predictability of outcomes by race for students, staff, and for families. The next slide, we'll talk a bit about the Educator Pipelines and Induction Team, which is helping to focus our efforts on this equity-centered principle induction and development. Here you'll see on the far left-hand side sort of the nestled circles of this work sitting within City Schools frameworks that all students lead and thrive, There's a human capital result there around talented staff members being hired and present in all their positions, in all positions every day and able to stay engaged. And the team that I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon and introduce you to is the Educator Pipelines and Induction Team, which is part of the reorganization of talent and organizational development. The Educator Pipelines and Induction Team is primarily focused on ensuring that we are building pipelines and on-ramps in ways that Diane talked about for the teacher lane to ensure that our principals and our teachers are able to have multiple pathways into the roles of educator. It's led by Zahara Valentine and Tracy Frazier, who is with us on the call today, who I'll introduce and will walk through a couple of slides for us as well. We continue to anchor in our partners, BKL and Associates, for our principal induction work. They've been a long, close-in partner, helping to provide coaching, capacity building, leadership development, and the necessary supports for brand new principals as they enter the principalship and begin to acquaint themselves with what it means to lead from the schoolhouse. We also partner with and continue to partner with new leaders, who again is a very long-standing, almost 20-year partner of the district, who helps to bring in and strengthen aspiring principals through a residency program. And I think this is one that is probably most familiar to the committee as well. The next slide is a graphic depiction of our current principal pipelines and induction programming. What you'll see at the top in the blue, orange, and green bands is the kind or the type of programming provided. So for the first time in a very long time, I think we revived a program around assistant principal induction. What we recognize is that from literature that we've presented to you before, through the Wallace Foundation and others, that in order to really have a very strong pipeline of school leaders and principals, you have to begin earlier than when they get into the pipeline to become a principal. And for us, part of our goal is to have more than 75% of our principals to be in-house or grown from inside the organization, inside the district. And so you see us starting in helping our assistant principals in programs year 1, 2, and 3 to be inducted into their roles as assistant principals through leadership development and cohorting that, and Tracy will talk about some of that. In that orange band, you see the Aspiring Principals Academy, which is a new venture for us that is readying highly qualified assistant principals for the principal role. And then those the other orange circles, just right of center, the Principal Preparation Academy, also known as our New Leaders Program, okay? And that third program, that third band, the green, the Principal Leadership Cohort, is what happens when Principal Stewart comes on board, has come through one of our pipelines, passes assessment center, and is placed in a school. This is the 2 years of support we provide for them to ensure that he has the development, the coaching, and the cohorting he needs to be successful in role. Going to the next slide, you'll see, I'll walk you very quickly through a couple of the leadership, assistant principal leadership work. The assistant principal leadership year 1 is focused around personal leadership. There are 22 cohort members, and you can see under those bullets, under 22 cohort members, the kinds of content, the kinds of development, the kinds of work that these 22 cohort members are practicing and actively learning around social emotional learning, time management, etc. You'll see on each of the slides coming forward, race equity protocol, right? So leaning into our courageous conversations about race protocol. This is an aspiration for us in our work. We are first working with the facilitators who lead these programs to ensure that we have a strong handle on it. But moving forward into next year and in the years after that, we are working to embed the racial equity work even more seamlessly into the programming. The next slide just is a highlight of the AP Leadership Year 2, which is a focus on change leadership. Again, stems from our leadership framework, major focus on instruction and goal setting, lots of opportunities to dig into student performance and data so that our folks are data literate. and also touches upon distributed leadership and peer learning and reflection. This next slide, I'm going to introduce Tracy Frazier. Tracy Frazier is an educational associate within the Educator Pipelines and Induction Team, and is focused on our principal pipelines and induction work. And she's going to talk about a program I am most excited about, one that we previewed for you in previous presentations, but I'm happy to report on where we are now. Tracy.
Thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to talk to you all briefly about our Aspiring Principals Academy. Those are our group of 8 cohort members who are focused on impact leadership. They're in this year-long program where they focus on various tasks to support them in their principalship. So we have monthly meetings. They engage in individual coaching, their collaborative coaching sessions. We dive into problems of practice, and they're really getting prepared for their school leadership licensing exam so that they can obtain that admin to endorsement on their license. So this month, well, actually last month, because March has just crept up on us. Last month in March, we went through a March Madness and we're closing out. And so during this month, they've been engaging in tasks every single week that's going to prepare them for the assessment center coming up. Focus on vision and planning, developing talent within their building, coaching instruction, how to lead their leadership teams. So this group is really getting hands-on practice based on the work that they're doing in the building. So they have been extremely engaged. We've gotten a great deal of feedback from them. And, you know, our hopes is that by the end of this year, really next month, when they apply for their principalship, they'll get in and they'll be a part of the pool, and that they kind of close out this pipeline. Next slide. And this next slide, it kind of shows what Ashley talked about, our year 1 cohorts, year 2, year 3, and what the criteria is for each of those for them to come in. So you can see in the green, those are our internal programs, that Aspiring Principals Academy. These are folks who are in the seat. They're a little bit more experienced, so they have at least 3 years of assistant principalship under their belt, and then they go through a pretty intense selection process. And then you can see in the blue, that's our new leaders, also a selection process as well. Next slide. In this next slide, it just shows them all lined up together so you can see the comparison of what this year actually looks like. They're going to start off with an induction at the beginning of the year, and then they go into their different areas of focus for learning based on which cohort they are a part of. So once again, with that Aspiring Principals Academy, we are prepping them for that assessment center, which is occurring next month. Next year, if you look at the little box in yellow, we hope to add a 3rd cohort. So we'll have our year 1, our year 2, and our year 3. And we have the age of cohort, or the experience of cohort members in these 1st, 2nd, and 3rd year, it ranges. You have some APs who have been in AP for 6 years, and then, you know, now they're ready to apply for principalship. So they may need only 2 years of support, or they may apply to be in that Aspiring Principals Academy. So we really try to differentiate, you know, our offerings based on the need of the population of our staff in city schools. And next, and I'll pass it back to Ashley.
So much, Tracy. Just a quick note about Tracy Frazier, who is new to the district. She's has less than a year with us. We are so excited and thrilled to have been able to create this team, the Educator Pipelines and Induction Team, and super thrilled to have both Sahara Valentine, who's a celebrated principal in our district in this work, and to bring Tracy on board as well, who's had experience as a principal, the equivalent of an ILED out in the Midwest and a principalship in Washington, D.C., and brings a tremendous wealth of professional development chops to the table that I think has set our assistant principals ablaze. As we try to really pour into our future school leaders and leaders across the district for that matter, it's important that we have top high quality talent leading that effort, people who know how to hold people to learning, how to hold people in cohort, and know how to move beyond professional learning to staff development and behavior change. And I'm so thrilled that Tracy has joined us in this work. This slide talks about our vision. Over the next 5 to 6 years, what we're trying to build is an equity-centered principal development infrastructure. This graphic is not ours, it's actually from the Wallace Foundation, which has been foundational in the ways in which we've been able to fortify, fund, and in some ways execute and maneuver the 7 domains you see on this slide, from leader standards all the way through high quality pre-service prep, selective hiring, et cetera, going through the systems to sustain the principal pipeline. It is our goal over the next 5 years, and I want to cue this up for you all. It's our goal to ensure that what we are creating are equity-centered principal development at each of those domain focal areas. What you see on this slide are 2 call-outs of the 7. If you're so interested, I'm happy to share the places where we are working with rapid fire and a lot of muscle and horsepower behind us in the other domains, but I want to call out 2 here. One is the high quality pre-service programming. Wallace Foundation currently has an RFP, request for proposals, which is due next Thursday, and we're competing for it, that would land the district and its partners a significant amount of resources, support, and financial capital to help accelerate the ways in which we are able to close the gap on these domains. So let me just walk through the 2 of them with you. At the top, high quality pre-service programming. What exists within City Schools is that we have the new leaders residency program, we have the assistant principal programs that we just talked about, that Tracy just talked about, the aspiring principal program, and a talented admin 1 program. But over the next 5 years, what we know we need to do is draw even stronger alignment between all of these programming so that no matter which program you enter, that you are getting consistent, high quality, and coherent development in the areas of instruction, instructional leadership, how to lead teams, personal leadership, and importantly, racial equity and consciousness. And at present, those programs don't all pull the thread. We want to have diverse programs, diverse pathways in, just like Diane said earlier, into the principalship, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Some people might want to go through Towson to get an admin 1. Others might want to go through the new leaders program. And so we want to make sure that we're providing multiple options depending on where people are in their levels of career and experience. That second bullet under 5-year vision is about launching pipeline programs with Towson and Morgan University. This grant through the Wallace Foundation, called the Equity Centered Principal Pipelines Initiative, would give us the resources to forge partnerships with both Morgan and Towson, something we've been working on for the past 3.5 years that I've been in this role, that would integrate racial consciousness skill building in the fabric of those degree programs, in the fabric of those aspiring principal programs, so that we're providing even more options for our teacher leaders, our assistant principals, and folks within our district who are interested in diving into a principal role. But we can ensure that they're getting quality, coherent, and consistent programming no matter where they choose to go, Towson, internal, Morgan, etc. That second row, evaluation and ongoing support, especially for those new on the job. This is Wallace domain number 6. This domain basically says that we need ongoing evaluation and support for principals once they're enrolled, especially those who are new to the job. What we have in place are things like BKL and Associates, their onboarding program, their induction program, their coaching. New Leaders also provides coaching. We clearly have our ILEDs, our ACLs, and our managers who provide a tremendous amount of support, coaching, and supervision to our principals, especially to our principals new on the job. There are also other offices, the equity offices, OAA, wholeness, et cetera, academics, special education, especially designed instruction, who also lean in and provide targeted support for principals who are new to that role. What we know we need to work on over the next 5 years is to ensure that all of that development equips principals to apply a consistent racial equity lens in every aspect of their role. The Wallace Grant will also give us an opportunity to organize ourselves in a particular way that ensures that the resources are designed and implemented in a way that's coherent and that people can come back to it as they need it over the arcs of their career. We're really excited about this Wallace opportunity. It's unlike the other opportunities we've had, and we're grateful for all of them. But it's different in that it would be a windfall of resources, upwards to almost $7 million over 5 to 6 years for us, our partners with Morgan and Towson, and with MSCE on the state level, who'll be working to fortify certification work for principals as well. So I'm going to stop there because I know we're at time. But wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to see some of the exciting work coming down the pipeline, so to speak. And we'll be happy to take any questions you have for myself, or Tracy, Diane, or Sarah.
Thanks to the team for the presentation and the effort and energy that you all are putting into the work. I'm going to start us off with some thoughts, and then I'm going to lend to Commissioner Roberts and then to Commissioner Griffin. Ladies, if that's okay with you. All right. I appreciate the work. I think what I want to see in a presentation like this, as robust as it is, what is the impact of our pipeline on student achievement? How do we see direct impact on what our young people are able to do as a result of the work that we are engaging in with this pipeline development for both teachers and for principal school leaders? So I'll start with that. I think it's a more broad question that can be addressed over time, but that is something that I would like to see moving forward, as best as we can capture that. What is the direct correlation to the work that we're doing? Because it to me, as a board commissioner, it will say that the work is working, right? The pipeline work is working because we're seeing student achievement gains in multiple ways. So can someone just touch on that as briefly as you can?
Yeah, I'll touch on it briefly from the principal side. So we have the good fortune to be able to present to this committee at least 3 times a year on the teacher and principal pipeline work. And so we try to show you a different facet each time, but I hear you loud and clearly, Commissioner, about wanting sort of that breadcrumb trail from the pipelining work to student outcomes. I will say that I will make sure that it's in our next presentation when we talk about, especially through our new leaders program. That's a place where it shows up most vividly because we've been able to track the principals who've been through particular programming and the ways in which they've been selected and placed in schools, and to be able to see the ways in which those principals have moved school data over time. So I'll make sure that we cue that up for you the next time we come before the committee around that. For some of our newer programs for the assistant principal, we're only in year 2, but are certainly tracking the ways in which the assistant principals are having impact on moving student data. It is, I will preface and say it's a much trickier and sort of looser correlation. It's more like attribution than it is a direct one-on-one correlation, but we can definitely get you those numbers to look at not only how long principals are staying enrolled, but we also look at things like attendance and achievement and how they've been able to move data, say, from the previous principals who were taking over schools. So that's certainly something we can certainly get to you. And if you want it any sooner than the next couple of months, we can pick that up for you as well.
Can I offer something that's more anecdotal too? Oh, Sarah, you should go about teachers, and then I was going to offer something. You okay?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to say is that I'll need to think a little bit more in terms of how to connect sort of each of our pipelines with student achievement data. So, you know, I'll need to dig deeper to see sort of what data exists and what we're able to pull together, to be honest. I mean, as we have been thinking about our goals and achievement to date, it's largely been sort of leveraging the pipelines and other pipelines, right? So university partners, et cetera, to fill and manage teacher vacancies to make sure that we have teachers in every classroom. And as part of contract renewal, each year we would take a look at teacher evaluation data for each of the pipelines relative to all teachers as sort of a measure of sort of effectiveness. But I just need to learn a little bit more about our ability and the data that exists to tie sort of a particular pipeline to student achievement data. But I will certainly do that.
And so this is a little bit anecdotal, and I feel like it's kind of a further step along pipeline development. But I think one way anecdotally that I think we've seen the impact of this work is that we've been very intentional in terms of principal placement over since Dr. Santeliza started, and really being very intentional about putting, you know, we go through a really rigorous process to evaluate principal candidates. We assess them and give them ratings. We've been very intentional about placing principals, our higher performing principals in some of our higher poverty schools. And I think one way that you've seen the results of that is that in this year, as we've been trying to get more students in person, many of the schools that were kind of pioneers in that, who did that early, were some of our higher poverty schools who had principals who are some of our higher performing principals, and those principals got students, have relationships with what we've really seen about bringing students in person is about principal relationships with community. You can't go knock on somebody's door today and say, hey, I really think you should come in person and have much result with that. When you're seeing large numbers of families choosing to come in person, that's about a relationship that's been built over time. And in some of those schools that started earlier, they had high returns of students coming back in the first place, and they built that over time. And the schools that have opened later, you really see some of that work over time in terms of really developing good quality principals and placing them in our higher poverty schools, and it resulting in us having, you know, we don't see racial gaps in terms of the return to school that you might see in other places, and that you really see high numbers of returns in some schools that are again higher poverty or higher EL ratios, because those are principals that really have longstanding relationships, solid, trusted relationships with their communities. And Tracy, I saw you had your microphone off, so I hope I didn't cut you off.
Oh, no.
Okay, great.
Commissioner McFadden, were you done? Okay. You were done?
I just want to, I was finished, but Allison, as you were talking, it brought something else to mind. And what we saw in the presentation about the cohorts for the AP group and the principal groups, when we think about, you know, that admin 2, that school leadership licensure assessment, right? It really is a test. Right, that's all the endorsement does, is you pass the test and that endorsement goes there. And so I appreciate what you all are discussing, right? All of the work that goes into really making sure that folks are developed in a way to sustain high quality school culture. So I appreciate that. One thing though, as Allison was talking, that I feel like may be missing from some of the work, and maybe it's there, it just wasn't highlighted here in these slides. 2 things: community and stakeholder relationships, right? So how do we assess that? How do we develop school leaders and principal and teachers also to a degree in that pipeline? How do we develop them to engage, if we're using that lens, right? And we're doing these alternative pathways to certification, we may have folks coming into the pipeline that are not as familiar with the demographic of families that we serve here in Baltimore City. So I think about that. How do we capture that, right? Like how do we put that in a part of the pipeline? And then this is what I also know to be very true: financial management, right? So how do we prepare because we're in a fair student funding model, right? We're in a model where our principals not only are instructional leaders, but they're technically running businesses, right? In addition to them being school instructional leaders and being able to cultivate those teams. So I think it would be important for us to see more of that as we move forward. How do we develop our school leaders, our principals, to really engage with the community in relevant ways, in innovative ways, and in compassionate ways? But then how do we also prepare them for the financial management piece that is so critical? And certainly, as we know, with the influx of right now, where federal dollar, the district is looking at it larger scale, but as the money trickles down to the schoolhouse, and we're having community budget meetings and we're engaging our school family councils, how do the principals manage all of that? So I think that's important. Commissioner Roberts, I know we've got to go, so.
Thank you, Commissioner McFadden, and thank you so much, Mr. Stewart, and to your team for the presentation. I really was interested in learning more about what our lessons learned over the last year as we saw the level of talent from our teachers and school leaders show up. So what are some of those intentional ways that we're using those skills, and how will they be embedded in the processes as we're recruiting from the different programs? And then how will those skill sets be addressed in the candidacy pool and within professional development moving forward, so we have that continuous development within the pipeline?
We get a lot of time to talk about that, but I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can, Commissioner Roberts, and say this: there were a tremendous amount of lessons learned for my team, for our team in particular, within human capital around this. The thing I think that drives most squarely to your point is, if I could draw a quick example, it would be, we had our resident principals sort of in some ways take a derailment from the typical year they would have in the new leaders program to help stand up the student learning centers. And I was first skeptical about that because Commissioner McFadden and I had had conversations about ensuring the fidelity of that model. But what I can tell you is that the training and development and the skill those people demonstrated was not like anything else we could have recreated in a seminar or facilitated environment. And so what that taught me, I'll speak for me, myself, personally, local, and immediate, is like there's something about putting people in the work and giving them the runway and the parameters and coaching to be successful. And so it's actually challenging for me the way in which I even posture myself around development, right? Because I'm thinking we have to take it slow and incubate people and get them. And for some people, yes. But these folks rose to the occasion. They were in schools. They were holding these centers up. They were, and in ways in which we didn't even know they brought their talents to bear. That also taught me that there are ways in which we don't capture well as a system the talents people are bringing to bear. We don't have a mechanism to actually account for it. And that's one of the priorities for next year, is to figure out, okay, what is Principal Smith or Vice Principal or Assistant Principal Fritz actually bringing to the table that we aren't able to capture in our rubric? How do we account for that? How do we capitalize on that? And how do we build and leverage his or her strength? That's one of the places that this Wallace exploratory test sort of lifted up for us. But this last year put it directly in our faces, put it directly in my face, I should say, that we have to do a better job of accounting for what people are bringing to the table and the ways in which we actually have to shift our professional development apparatus. The last thing I'll say is, it kind of points to Commissioner McFadden's point around the community engagement. That stuff is baked into the development work, but we recognize that we're not the only voice on this. So our partnership with Morgan State University is going to help us leverage the work that they already do so well in their degree programs around helping people connecting with the community and how to build culture. We've got the mechanics of how you connect with parents and how you do this. Yes, absolutely. But how do you actually build culture in a way that has you leading from your seat, in a way that has you modeling for your staff, modeling for community, and inviting and sharing community power is something that we don't do great all the time as a district, if I can say so, right? And so we're working on it. But we recognize there's expertise at Morgan, and they're going to help us bring that piece in. So that's one of the other things we actually saw a big need for as well. And I'm thrilled. I'm actually over the moon excited that we get to partner with Morgan this way, because every time I come to this committee and we talk about this, like, where's Morgan? Where's Coppin? And it's like, we're trying. And I'm so excited that we're finally going to get to work together in this way. But there's so many other lessons we can talk about, but those are two that come to mind.
Thank you so much, Francis.
Welcome.
And Commissioner Griffin, if I may interject very quickly, Mr. Stewart, I appreciate you highlighting those SLC resident principals. And it makes me also think about their continuous development, because they, as we know, developed an entire playbook, so to speak, for how school leaders and folks can move forward. So I definitely think, and if any of them are listening and watching, I know that you all put in some, really great work. So shout out to you from the Board of School Commissioners. But now, how do we retain those folks, right? How do we provide continuous development for them so that we don't ultimately lose them, right? With the skill set, to your point, that they developed and learned in the pandemic, right? They have value and worth. So we want to make sure that we continue to cultivate that value and worth in a way that, to your point, is not necessarily it may not fit within the plan that we saw, but there is some room for a differentiation for some folks that just have different skill sets and perhaps may even need to be accelerated through the pipeline because of that skill set.
Yeah.
Commissioner Griffin?
So we were tapping into where I was gonna start to ask questions, and one of my big questions was, like, what is the rubric, or what's the definition of a successful principal or assistant principal that we're working from that has created these, like, specific pipelines? Like, how are we saying, okay, a principal is successful, an assistant principal is successful because of XYZ, and that's why we want to include this type of training. That's why we want to include this type of professional development. And as I was sitting and listening, I was really thinking about two things. One is, there's a special sauce that every AP or principal is going to bring. And that's what you all are kind of wrestling with, like, trying to quantify, right? It may look different. Their special sauce may be the ability to connect teachers and students in positive ways. It may be the ability to pull in partners from the outside community. It may be they are, like, the greatest speaker in the world, and when they walk through the school, the sun shines and the birds tweet and, like, the school building sings. Like, some principals bring a lot of special sauce into a building, and figuring out, I think having a part of a program that helps a principal figure out what their special sauce is helps them develop even more confidence in creating that culture and spreading that across a building. The other thing that I was thinking about within that is this differentiation piece, right? Because you have folks who may come with different experiences to this role, sitting through a professional development that's going through the nitty-gritty of how to hire, or how to create a good team, or how to manage well, may not be everyone's thing that they need. So it's almost like how do you start to give folks more project experience-based case studies or experiences within the development, so that you can see, like, okay, candidate XYZ in this program, they actually need an experience more like this. And ABC needs an experience like that. Like, so-and-so needs to be more in the classroom and have more textbook stuff. ABC needs to be out in the field because they can start to apply. They're in the apply space versus the learn and get information space.
Yep.
And so just throwing out some things to think about and how to infuse it We love our rubrics. We love the way we like to measure. Some measurement, we can try to quantify it, but we have to make it, like, we have to make up what that category is.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing, as far as that, like, special sauce piece, involving the community in the development of, like, what makes a great principal. They'll tell you.
Yes,
They'll
they
tell
will.
you what that extra category should be and how to measure it and how it shows up for them. And I think that goes back to Commissioner McFadden's first question of, like, how is this impacting our students and parents? That's what the community is going to tell you. They're going to tell you how it's impacting them. And that's that last piece that you can add in to show how effective principals and assistant principals are going through these pathways.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I agree. If I could jump in, I think when I heard Commissioner McFadden speaking, it made me think of the word sincere. And I use it all the time when I talk about leadership, even as a teacher. That's the it factor. Like, so it's really hard to, one, develop the it factor, because sometimes you either have it or you don't, right? And also identifying what that it factor is. So, you know, through the pipeline, we know that we want our leaders to be managers of people. We want them to be inspirational. We want them to be instructional leaders. Those are things that you can teach and develop, you know, and show and model and all of those things. But that it factor sincerity piece is what is that moving target. And that's where the differentiation that you mentioned, that's where that comes in. And it definitely 100% involves the community. And so in coming in new to this team and moving forward, something that we've already started doing is this gap analysis, right? Where we are engaging the community, engaging principals who are working with assistant principals to see what those gaps and what those needs are. And that's why on that first slide, when we talk about that first year in the pipeline, it's all about personal leadership. And that personal leadership almost has nothing to do with you being a principal in a school. It's about you knowing who you are and how you communicate, how you walk, how you talk, how you develop people. So it's exciting. It's often a moving target, but that thread carries through all of these years because that's what's going to create that sincerity in the leader who's not afraid of the community they work in, who's not putting on a show for the community that they work in, and they have that sincere leadership. So we're with you 100% on that. And it's something that is coming, and I'm excited about it.
Wonderful.
I always learn from you all. Thank you very, very much. You always give me something to chew on and take back to the team. So it is a privilege to be in partnership with you in this way.
I appreciate that. And as we get ready to queue up our MOY update, I would like to, and I'm going to send this also, but I would like to hear when we think of the teacher pipeline, what we did see, to Commissioner Roberts' point, we saw some folks that learned that they may that they have new skills, right? They have skills to work with young people in ways that they may not have been working with them in the past. Maybe teacher assistants, maybe bus assistants, bus aides, maybe some folks like that. So I would like to see how we are kind of focusing on that development to ensure more homegrown talent. And then also our paras to teachers. How are we looking at para educators moving into full-time classroom teaching experiences? So that's just where my brain is thinking as we were talking about the pipeline. I would love to see that. And then certainly, I know that it's not teacher or principal, but once we finish with the principal, right, and they're highly effective and they get there, then is there a pathway for centralized leadership, right? Do we have a pathway for ILEDs or any other chief level or you know, something like that? How are we developing and cultivating our school principals who are excelling into that next level to continue this continuum of leadership and pathway for the district? So those are things to think about that I can send because I know that we have another presentation.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We
Thank you.
appreciate the time. All right, bye.
Chief Dabrowski.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I don't know, should we do a quick time check? Just to help the team know, you can imagine the breadth and depth of this presentation. So I'm just mindful of the clock. So how do you want us to proceed?
This is important for us to hear. Certainly we can get to the high points as best as we can. I know that we have an astute group of commissioners here who have done their homework, but we'll move. If folks have to go, then they'll have to go. We don't have anyone signed up for public comment. So pretty much today it's staff and the commissioners with us. So just go ahead. We'll time check when we need to time check as we're getting closer to that 5:30 mark.
Great, much appreciated. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joan Dabrowski. I'm the Chief Academic Officer. This afternoon, we're thrilled to be here to share our middle of the year updates in ELA and math. So there's a team of folks who will present. We're going to start with our literacy. We did build in just a space or a pause so that if there are literacy ELA questions, there'll be a time to check in and ask those questions before we then transition into math. A similar pause when we finish our math section. And then at that point, we'll transition to talking about our continuum of learners when we think about our students with special needs, our ELs, our gifted and advanced learners. Then we'll also have some updates around our MTSS efforts and our TSI and CSI supports. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Literacy, Monique DeBye.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Chief Dabrowski. Good afternoon to commissioners and everyone else on the call. I'm Monique DeBye, Director of Literacy, and I will be sharing with you our literacy data as well as our progress to date and the implications for the future. Next slide, please. And so some of you know I transitioned into this role in January, and it was really important that my team, which consists of 3 coordinators, 2 specialists, as well as a project manager, were really clear on what work we were doing in district office and how that work iterated into classroom expectations as well as into the community. And so we worked over the course of 8 weeks to devise a vision statement for our team that was really grounded in what we wanted to see for the greater Baltimore community, as well as what we wanted to see for our families and our children. And so this vision is truly grounded in collaboration, coherence, and authenticity. And the statement on the bottom is actually lifted from the literacy blueprint the blueprint for success under the literacy domain around ensuring that our students are gaining complex knowledge, deep conceptual understanding, and the ability to express themselves powerfully. Next slide. So prior to the start of this school year and closing out the spring year when we started with the pandemic, we wanted to articulate an acceleration plan that identified our intentions for this coming school year. And so this school year for 2021, we really wanted to be grounded in grade level content, but also amenable to our students' personal needs and supporting the appropriate scaffolds and individualized support for all of our students. Click, please. Okay, never mind, the animations are not there, so you can go back, Josh. Sorry about that. We created a comprehensive structure grounded in these areas that you see here on the slide. And so all of our work is built on what we believe and explicitly chose to support and achieve our goals. We continue a steady focus on our blueprint for a generation, which is the implementation of a coherent, rigorous, standard-based curricula, and in the consistent use of research-informed expertise in content and pedagogy, and to create structures and opportunities for our teachers and school leaders to not only deepen their content knowledge and their pedagogical knowledge, but also to lead continuous improvement efforts in their schools. What you see on the bottom are just some samples of the platforms that we are currently using for personalized learning, as well as assessments, as well as knowledge building in our core curricula, and then those foundational skills blocks. Next slide. And so we truly spent the spring and over the summer and into the fall just reflecting on what we've learned from the pandemic period, and started to question our teachers in the field, thought about reflected on what we're learning, and then really wanted to think about what are we doing, how are we moving forward, and how are we engaging all important stakeholders. Some of the learning that we came back and reflected on was just the need for teachers to have time to be with teachers and to learn from teachers and to learn from best practices in the field. Because we did not have a metric of success for what true pandemic learning looked like or teaching and learning looked like, it was really important that we leveraged teachers who were doing this really well. And so in the literacy office, we have reimagined office hours. And so we're now inviting teachers in who are actually engaging in blended learning, who are actually successfully engaging students and getting them on and having them complete assessments so that they're actually highlighted and featured during our office hours so that teachers can come and learn from people who actually have credibility in doing this work. In addition to that, we've also designed PDs that professional developments that are meeting the needs of teachers during this, unprecedented time, but not just that, offering flexible hours so that they can access them on their own via asynchronous platforms. And then we also house the videos where we have some videos of teachers actually engaging in best practices, as well as video tutorials on how to use the different platforms that we have. Next slide. So this is some of our actual active user data for the personalized learning platforms. And so we actually did a comparison of beginning of year to middle of year. And so as you can see, we are actually increasing participation in our active user in the platforms from BOY to MOY. And just to highlight a few things, Amplify is actually for kindergarten through 5th grade. And so this is the personalized learning platform where students are actually, they take an assessment, it is adaptive. And so the instruction is tailored to meet the needs of the students. And so we are seeing some increases in usability, but also in this, which you'll see on the next slide, is that there is a correlation between increased usage and increased outcomes on the assessments and the lessons. Next slide. So thankful to our partners at Amplify, they were able to correlate our data for our kindergarten through 5th grade students and show a positive correlation between higher usage of the personalized instructional platform with outcomes on the Amplify assessment. We really wanted to highlight 1st grade just here so that you could actually see if you're unable to make out the bars. And so the highest usage is the teal color, which is the bar furthest to the right. As you can see, there is 64% of 1st graders who are actually showing above average growth or better from BOY to MOY because they have spent more than 6 hours a month on the actual system. What we do recommend is that there is at least 45 minutes per week, and that could be broken down into 3 15-minute increments. Next slide. In addition, DIBBLES, which is also a part of the Amplify system, which assesses students' foundational literacy skills, we're actually seeing that each grade level is closing the gap on the national user base from BOY to MOY. City schools blocks and dots are actually green, and you can see that the height of the bar, well, the line is actually more steep for our data versus the national comparison in the blue. Next slide. In addition, city schools moved more than 3 times the amount of students out of well below benchmark from BOY to MOY for the national user base. And so that is all districts, LEAs who are actually using this Amplify instructional platform and assessment platform. We actually move the most students out of well below benchmark during a pandemic, which is unprecedented considering most districts that are using the Amplify are actually showing decreases in their students on or above grade level and increases in well below benchmark. Next slide, please. We have data for iReady, which is the diagnostic assessment for middle grades. High school was actually, they had the option to participate in middle of the year, so we do not have the data for them. However, just some highlights that I want to identify here is that we're seeing a decrease of students performing in a well below and below grade level with growth in and above grade level. Although it is incremental and small, it is growth and it is a decrease in the well below. And so this actually further supports our need to continue our approach of individualized support for our students, as well as maintaining focused grade level content and standards. And so we've seen a larger need for small group instruction across all grades. And from the qualitative feedback that we've received, we've identified the need for teachers to have more explicit support and resources. And so I did note that already was optional. And so we're really hoping to see 4 things. Increases in students actually accessing the personalized learning platforms, a continued need for support for teachers around planning and implementing small groups, a continued need for targeted individualized support for students, and then also the prioritization of scheduling models that are going to give teachers that time to be able to engage students in personalized learning opportunities as well as enhanced communications. Next slide. This year, we have been lucky to expand our City Schools partnership with leading educators. They were previously working with mathematics, and we're actually working with them in the literacy department now to implement cycles of improvement, which are grounded in curriculum. And so they are curriculum embedded content cycles for teachers. And we are actually using those at our 39 literacy intensive learning sites. Some of the innovative approaches that we've been able to also employ is the early grades tutoring partnership with Amplify. We have 28 schools participating in that partnership. We also have school-based fellows in the Literacy Improvement Fellowship, which are actually engaging in testing their change ideas through the science of improvement, and they are working with secondary foundational literacy, so around the big 5, vocabulary, fluency, comprehension, and those schools that have fellows in them are actually testing their change ideas through a partnership. And then in addition to that, we reimagine our elective courses. And so when we start to talk more about equity, ensuring that we have courses for our students, such as African American literature. And so that course is being built out and piloted as I speak. Next slide. And so just some continued opportunities. This year, we were able to partner with the Family and Community Engagement Office and host the first Family Literacy Night with them. And this was a part of the Parent University program, Family University program that we have here in City Schools. And so that collaboration has actually brought forth more opportunities for families to have access to resources as well as videos. We also hosted a Black History Month Black Author panel for our families, in which families were able to view a recording of a panel that I facilitated with Black authors around how to foster a love of literacy in the home and how to encourage children to have a love of reading. In addition to that, we have also provided resources and materials that are relative to each component of our instructional block, and these are housed on a SharePoint for staff. And then we also have a family-facing page through the district site with resources through the Family University. And then also just encouraging consistent communication with all stakeholders. And so this has really been an important part of my onboarding because I'm coming from the school side, and that we want to be able to bridge the gap between central office and schools so that they know that we're actually in this work together and it is not a us versus them, but that we're doing what's right for our children together. Next slide, please. And so the 4 key levers that our office has really been focused on during this time of thinking through what will recovery efforts look like, what will restoration look like, what will reinvigoration look like for our children and our families. We really want to focus in on curriculum implementation, but then also I will also highlight for secondary curriculum acquisition because we do not currently have a curriculum for grades 9 through 12. In addition to that, stakeholder engagement. This is truly a village. We cannot do this work alone. We cannot work in silos, and I'll use that cliche term. And so it's really important that we are not only engaging, coming from the district office purview, not only engaging school leaders, not only engaging teachers, but are we engaging the greater community? Are we engaging our partners? Are we engaging our community members who actually want to be involved in improving the trajectory for our children here in Baltimore City? In addition to that, ensuring that every decision that we make is based on data, not just quantitative data, but also qualitative data. What information are we getting from the field? What information are we hearing from our families? Are we actually, tuning our ears into what's happening outside to know exactly what our children need and how to best engage them in literacy? And then finally, virtual learning best practices. And so during this pandemic period, we have learned a lot about lack of access, lack of engagement. And so thinking through, how we can best leverage things that have been going really well? And then what do we need to reflect on to make things better to ensure that even, moving forward, whether we are in a full blended learning module going into school year 2021-22, we're able to handle that, but we're also able to keep our children engaged and keep them flourishing. Next slide. And so at this time, we have opened up for questions. If anyone has any questions.
Principal Dubai, I'm going to keep this quick. I'm going to call you principal because
it's okay, Commissioner McFadden.
Listen, you did a great job as a school leader, and it just kind of goes back to our previous presentation on strengthening a pipeline, because now you're leading some really important literacy work for the district, and it's great to have a most recent school leader engage in this work in this way. So I just wanted to highlight you for that, and just celebrate you for that.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Absolutely. Commissioner Roberts, I see you present.
I do not have any questions, but thank you so much for the presentation today.
You're welcome, Commissioner Roberts. Good to see you again.
And Commissioner Griffin, I see you.
Yes. Sorry, y'all. I had to stand up. I only have one question. One, wonderful presentation. I appreciate all of the data and splitting apart, being able to see math and literacy across the district. You made one comment that piqued my interest around scheduling models that support teachers for effective use of these platforms. And I'm so curious to hear more about what you think those are, and how we might be able to better take advantage of implementing those to support our teachers as they move into this next school year.
Yep.
That's a great question. And so we are actively in drafting stage. I would say we're in brainstorming stage around how to reimagine time. I think time is always a big thing for school leaders as well as instructional leadership, executive directors, ILEDs, right? Try not to use acronyms so much, and I know we have people watching, but time has always been an issue. And so thinking about, not taking time away from core curriculum, right? But also ensuring that we're making sure we make the time for children to get support with foundational literacy gaps. And this is like a up in the air for us. And so we've actually taken a multi-department approach to thinking through this, because it's going to impact all content areas. So we don't have like a true answer for that yet. And I don't know if Chief wants to jump in, or Janice, you would like to jump in, but we're definitely thinking through how we can reimagine what school looks like moving forward to ensure there's actually time to do those most important things for children.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I'll keep my eyes open too for any research I stumble upon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Board Commissioners. I'm Beth Sappy, the Director of Math. And just one more thing to add about the scheduling models is that will be presented next month during the next presentation. So there will be more information to come on that. So I wanted to start today by sharing our math vision that all city students are mastering grade level appropriate content grounded in the Maryland College and Career Readiness Standards, where highly effective instruction is evident every day. This is the why and the how we align all the work we do with math to support our students. Next slide. In order for teachers to have the correct approaches and strategies they need, these opportunities to build the content knowledge and give students access to grade level standards. This brings us to our theory of change. It starts with the leaders of the work. So if leaders build, lead, and support a job-embedded curriculum-specific professional learning system, then our teachers deepen their content and curricular knowledge and transfer their learning into classroom practice. Then our students experience excellent and equitable instruction that allows them to master grade level content and cultivate a love for learning. Next slide, please. Our vision and theory of change is grounded in the instructional core, which I know you've seen before because I share this every single time. These components are heavily integrated into our instructional practice. Our work in mathematics is to continue to anchor our teaching and learning in the specific teacher and student actions as it relates to the content. These connect to our core actions. So when we reflect on focus, coherence, and rigor, we are thinking about the content. When we employ instructional practices, we're thinking about the math teaching practices, or what we call the MTPs. And when we provide all students with opportunities to exhibit the mathematical practices, we are thinking about the standards of mathematical practice. When we ground our instruction in these core actions, we're providing equitable instruction for all students. In City Schools, we have various resources and ongoing PD opportunities that support each of these core actions. From our curricular resources like Eureka Math and our professional or our personalized learning tools like iReady, Zern, Imagine Math, to our navigating academic planning resources that focus on the MTPs and SMPs, which are available through our grade level Google Classrooms as well as our Math PD site. And today I want to share what we are learning from the field and what we're doing to support. Next slide, please. For us to determine a strategy to support our vision, core actions, and theory of change, we need to start by honing in on how our students are performing on our grade level content. You can see that over the past 4 years since we adopted Eureka Math curriculum, our data overall has steadily increased, which is a clear and exciting impact on our student mastery. From 2017 to 2020, we were implementing standards aligned ANET assessments, and this year we transitioned to using Affirm and the module assessments. So what you see above is the Q1 and Q2 averages for all 4 years across like just the average for all grades. And this increase can be attributed to a focus and expectation that students are engaged in grade level content every day. Although this is a gradual increase, it continues to show us that we need to move forward with this focus. And as we ground our focus on core instruction and the Eureka tools to support implementation, Great Minds introduced a new resource this year called InSync, which we discussed during the BOI presentation. Within the InSync platform, there are videos for students to engage with each day, as well as Learn Anywhere plans to support teachers with planning virtually, as well as in-person instruction. And I'm excited to share that as of March 1st, we had over 1 million logins to the platform. Next slide. When looking at the standard mastery data and pairing that with what we're seeing in classroom observations, we are learning many things. A few trends include that teachers need support in internalizing content to meet the demands of the standards. And we're also observing and hearing from teachers that students are struggling with reasoning and modeling around the mathematics. So in response to that data and the feedback from our teachers and in alignment with our theory of change, we are developing asynchronous content videos to support teachers in developing that deeper understanding of content and its coherence within and across grades. We are leading a series of asynchronous and synchronous sessions to support reasoning and modeling for teachers that align to the standard of mathematical practice 3 and 4, which is around the modeling and reasoning to support students. And we're seeing that as we are looking at our student work and observing classrooms, that we have to continue that focus to support our teachers' deep understanding to best support our students as they are going through that content. We are also offering best practice sessions in our bi-weekly math talks that are led by our team, our partners, as well as our teachers. And we are holding ongoing office hours to support teachers individually as well as in small groups. The thing that I'm most excited about is how we've been really focusing and engaging teachers to be the agents of change. By having them lead professional learning, they're supporting in the development of our trajectory of learnings for teachers and leaders, as well as the support in the development of our prioritized scope and sequence. It's been great to watch them and teachers learn from each other. And we know they're the experts who are engaged in the work with our students. So it's really been a learning experience for me and my team as well, really learning from our teachers this year. Next slide. Today, I want to spotlight a few of the strategies we put in place to support schools in response to the core instructional data as we are ensuring equitable access for all of our students. We are in year 2 of a partnership with leading educators. Monique mentioned that at the beginning of the session to support the development and implementation of content cycles for middle school teachers at 14 schools. This year, we have led 57 sessions as well as 85 one-on-one coaching meetings as of probably about 3 weeks ago. And at the beginning of cycle 1, 42% of our teachers earned 100% on the exemplar task, which we weren't excited about, but we also could see there that there was a need for improvement. And then at the end of the cycle, we improved to a 71% of teachers that earned 100% on the task. This data is showing us that the sessions and coaching are having a positive impact on teachers' conceptual math knowledge And as we think about the future, we will stay the course with targeted coaching supports for our content leaders and teachers who are continuing to develop their content knowledge and implementation practices. We are also seeing student impact based on the looking at student work component of the cycle. So we are seeing where students are progressing in their writing, which is also exciting based off the cohort with leading educators. Lastly, based off success with the content cycles, principals are being more intentional about setting up specific priorities, as well as the systems and structures for academic planning meetings at their schools to align to the cycles. So we're currently also working in partnership with leading educators and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to potentially, hopefully, expand the current grant for another 3 years, since this current grant that we have will be ending in June. Next slide, please. We also have a goal to ensure algebra access for all students in middle school. This program supports middle school honors programming at 24 schools with the goal to provide equitable access and rigorous content for students and to deepen teacher content knowledge. This strategy is supporting schools that do not currently offer honors programming. When we look at the student data from schools engaged in this cohort against schools offering honors programming through a traditional pathway, there's only a 2% difference in their mastery of content standards. This is evidence that all students can succeed regardless of what schools they attend, even when given the opportunity. And over the past 5 years, the number of Black and Latinx students with access to advanced math in middle school has increased by 41%. And we continue to build this program. We will continue to build this program until all students across all schools have access. As part of the strategic plan, we have also partnership with Stevenson University, who is offering practice courses tailored to our teacher-specific needs to prepare them for the practice exam. The first session just ended with all teachers meeting the expectations, and they are now in the process of registering for the middle school math praxis, which is exciting because I know when I updated you on this last year, we were at about 30% of our middle school teachers being certified in math. So our goal is to get that to 100 over the next 5 years. As we shift to our iReady data, we will start by looking at how relative placements change from fall to winter. We are seeing more students on or 1 grade below, increase in all grades but grade 1. In response to data, we are also learning that our students need more individualized supports. Teachers need support with planning and implementing small groups, and schools need to have clear scheduling models to give students the time needed when engaging in personalized learning. And this is what, based off our data and what we're learning, to what Monique mentioned earlier around the scheduling models, is we're being really strategic around thinking through exactly how are we going to make sure that all students have access to that core content every day, but are also given the opportunities ongoing to have access to our individualized learning platforms that we know will support them, as well as small group instruction. Next slide, please. This chart here shows how we compare other districts that have similar demographics, including Detroit, Fresno, Oakland, and Shelby County. You can see here that Urban Collaborative moved from 20 to 26% of students on or above grade level, while Baltimore started at 21 and has increased to 25. This is slightly lower than the change in the Urban Collaborative schools, but overall we are moving at a similar pace this school year. And this slide is more around the personalized learning, so the engagement that students have. We've leveraged funds this year to purchase the iReady online personalized learning platforms for students in grades K through 8. The recommendation of usage is around 45 minutes a week, and you can see that some grade averages are lower than that. The question we are focused on learning about through this data is what are the barriers for students accessing personalized learning for about 45 minutes a week? We still have about 2.5 months before summer, and we're working hard to support teachers through professional learning to get a deeper understanding on how personalized learning can support students' overall academic outcomes. One barrier our teachers shared with us is that there's so many resources this year. In adjusting to teaching virtually, it has been really hard to juggle all the resources to support the students. So as we continue to learn from our teachers, we are working closely with them to design summer opportunities that will support this planning using the resources with a main focus on supporting small groups as part of our recovery strategy. Another layer of support offered for students, personalized learning beyond iReady, is through Zearn for grades K through 5 and Imagine Math for grades 9 through 12, as well as students on or above grade level in 6 through 8. The data shows we need to get more kids engaged in personalized learning. We are holding intervention focus groups with teachers to learn how to best support teachers moving forward. We are continuing to offer ongoing PD for all personalized learning platforms, and we are learning from schools with those highest percentages of students engaged in passing lessons so we can develop strategies moving forward to support the schools that are not engaged. And as Monique did a great job articulating this slide here, we are in alignment to thinking about what our key levers are for recovery. We really want, the questions that we're thinking through is really, what is the learning translating into practice? So what are we learning and what does that look like in instruction and in practice for students? How are teacher practices being shifted based off their new learning? And what are we seeing in the outcomes? We're also looking at how we can balance our supports and providing resources and guidance while at the same time supporting practices at the school level. And then lastly, it's what can we take from our COVID learning to impact future planning? So for example, what have we learned when we are seeing teachers using some of these personalized learning tools and some of their small group strategies virtually that we can take and implement when we go back in schools in person? Next slide. Before we move on to the next portion, I just want to pause and give you all an opportunity to ask any questions around math.
I'm going to defer to Commissioner Griffin. Commissioner Griffin, did you have any questions or comments? We can keep going.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon or good evening now, commissioners. My name is Jalima Alisaya. I am the Director of Specialized Learning. And I wanted to, as we think about the math and literacy strategy, we have to think about how we're ensuring equitable access for our continuum of learners. That includes our students with disabilities, our EL students, and our GAL students. We've really approached this year, this very challenging year, as a year of opportunity and innovation to support our continuum of learners. We've provided professional development to teachers through systemic PD, asynchronous monthly sessions, as well as weekly office hours. We have direct coaching and websites also for teachers that include teacher resources, often resources and lesson plans that are designed and developed by other city schools teachers. We've also leveraged our teachers this year in various ways, including ensuring that we're getting teacher voice as we make decisions around professional development and resources, but we're also using our teachers for planning and facilitating professional development. An example of that this year is that we had special education teachers aligned to the Department of Specialized Instruction, which is my team. We had a special education teacher co-lead every session for systemic professional development. And we even had a session for our secondary special education teachers on secondary literacy and the science of reading. And this was a result not only based on data, but just based on teacher voice. So additional PD opportunities include professional development for our teachers on high leverage practices in special education, as well as progress monitoring for students with disabilities, monthly GAL liaison trainings, as well as eGate trainings for some of our GAL teachers. For curricular resources, for our ELs, we have curriculum overlays and supplemental materials for newcomers. And then I think you heard a lot from Beth and Monique around the personalized learning platforms, but those are available also to our continuum of learners to ensure that there is individualized and personalized learning available for our students to address some of their foundational skills in areas of need. This year, we've also, like I said, we've approached this year, this very challenging year, as a year of opportunity and innovation. So we've really leveraged instructional technology this year. With our partners in the Office of Special Education, we've provided professional development to our teachers around those instructional technology tools that really help to show them how to give access to all students, how to implement specially designed instruction in a virtual setting. We had a professional, a PLC, professional learning community in the fall, where we had a number of teachers engaged to learn the different tools and instructional technology tools needed to be able to implement specially designed instruction and just provide supports to our continuum of learners. And then we have direct coaching also available for all of our teachers so that they're able to support our continuum of learners effectively. Next slide, please. Thank you. So at the beginning of this year, I'm going to shift now to talk about some of the MTSS work. So in the beginning of this year, I had an opportunity to share some of the great work we've been doing in city schools around our multi-tiered systems of support. So this year, we were able to bring on 7 MTSS liaisons that are aligned to each CLN. And in those CLNs, across CLNs 1 through 7, we've identified 35 schools to provide direct coaching support. You can see here our MTSS framework, and that framework includes a relentless focus on data, shared leadership, as well as an alignment of resources to provide tiered supports to our students. Throughout the year, the MTSS liaisons have partnered with our ACLs, our special education liaisons, our school managers, in order to provide collaborative support to our schools, those 35 schools I mentioned. Through that support, they've been able to provide some systems coaching to strengthen ILT structures. Teacher teams, they support teacher teams with analyzing and unpacking data in order to make instructional decisions for students, including decisions around tiered support so that every student gets what they need when they need it, as well as supporting SST teaming structures and really the process to identify the root causes and appropriate SST supports for our students who have the most intensive needs. Support is provided to schools around the progress monitoring of the personalized learning platforms, as well as attendance. That's really been a focus of the MTSS liaisons this year, being with virtual learning and the challenges that we've had with attendance, as well as I think Monique spoke to the relationship between student performance and the personalized learning platforms. And so we know that that's a way to, provide those interventions and personalized supports to our students. So the MTSS liaisons have really had a focus on, looking at that personalized learning usage data and supporting schools with monitoring that data and really increasing that usage. They've also supported schools with other points of data, just really looking at the EWI indicator reports, as well as diagnostic assessments to identify student needs and struggling students and aligning the appropriate types of supports for those students. We were fortunate enough to be able to bring to you via video one of our MTSS liaisons for CLN 6, Ms. Dana Johnson, and the principal from Harlem Park, Principal Jackson, to share their work and their partnership with this relentless focus on data, really how they've worked together to be able to provide those supports to students. You can go to the next slide. Unfortunately, we will not be able to share the video today due to time, but I do encourage everyone to click the link and watch the video. I think it's very telling around the work of the MTSS liaisons and how that work has really impacted the schools with that relentless focus on data. So I strongly encourage you to watch that video. I will say though that this video, it's just one of many stories. Commissioner McFadden, when you asked about, the work that we're most proud of, this is something that our office is definitely most proud of, the work around MTSS and the work of the MTSS liaisons, especially in the middle of a pandemic, being able to build relationships with schools and partner with schools to be able to have that relentless focus on data so that we can provide the appropriate supports to our students. I think Lori Lynn might be taking over.
Before you go, you just so CLNs 1 through 7 are the only ones included in the 35 MTSS target schools?
Yes. Yes, we have 7 MTSS liaisons. They support CLNs 1 through 7, and within those CLNs, they've identified a total of 35 target schools. They provide support to all schools, but they provide very direct, intensive coaching support to 35 schools.
So what happens in the other networks?
So in the other networks, they're still providing support around data analysis. They provide support during for professional development, during CLN meetings to various schools. But for the 35 schools, they are working hand in hand with those schools to be able to, have them implement the MTSS framework in those schools.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we are, just want to mention, I know that there are a couple of more slides. This is something that we asked for, though, the CSI and the TSI update. So I'm eager to move forward with it. And we still just need a few moments for procurement. I hope folks are still there, but today's meeting was pretty packed. So
good
you
evening.
said
Yep, it's
Go
me.
ahead.
So good evening, commissioners. My name is Lori Lynn Sutton, and I'm the coordinator for School Turnaround. Today, I would like to share with you just a couple of things around the work happening with our TSI and CSI schools and how this work really ensures a coherence in the support to our schools, the school leaders, teachers, and most importantly, to our students. To do that, I would like to just highlight a couple of the bullets on each of the slides. So we currently have 31 schools that are identified as CSI schools. Schools are identified every 3 years. I do want to mention that there is a waiver that MSDE is submitting that will likely extend the designation for both our TSI and our CSI schools. As part of the CSI plan, which serves as the school SPP, each school has selected evidence-based strategies. And you'll see listed some of those strategies. All schools have professional learning communities as a strategy. All high schools have on track to graduation. And then schools selected intervention, summer learning, extended learning, and social emotional learning, which includes a focus on re-engagement, the engagement of our families, tutoring support for students, and resources, including several partnerships to support the work. Additionally, all of our schools, CSI schools, have at least one staff on the grant to provide direct support to teachers, including our literacy coaches for our CSI literacy intensive sites, instructional coaches, and staff to support re-engagement and social emotional learning. What I did want to highlight was that this year we rolled out a comprehensive progress monitoring process for our CSI schools. And to date, each of the schools has participated in 2 progress monitoring cycles since September, led by the School Turnaround Office. At these meetings, we discuss the school's CSI goals and strategies. Schools present their data, they share their successes, challenges, and barriers, and then they'll identify areas for support. We're currently entering our 3rd cycle, which will include the enhanced monitoring of 10 schools. But the progress monitoring has really allowed us to make necessary updates as we go to the plans, so we can ensure that we are using the funds with fidelity and the strategies are really making an impact. And that's been really important during this virtual learning, that schools really have the opportunity to kind of reassess their plans and make adjustments as necessary. I do want to also share that this process has been recognized by MSDE, and as a district, we've been able to share this at statewide meetings with other districts. And then our CSI schools, we currently have 85 schools that are identified as TSI.
Lori, hold on for
Sure.
1 second. Someone needs to mute. Okay, there they go. Thank you.
I'm
It was
sorry.
hard to hear. It was someone else that was unmuted.
Okay, no problem. So we do have 85 schools that are identified as TSI schools, and like our CSI schools, they are also identified every 3 years. And as I mentioned, that waiver could extend their designation. However, unlike our CSI schools, there are no additional grant funding provided to our TSI schools. So as a result, the district has leveraged a district support model, which includes a collaboration across key offices, and you'll see those on the slide, that provide ongoing professional development, direct support to schools, and progress monitoring, and many of which has been mentioned earlier in this presentation. So within the school's SPPs, each school performance plan, each school has developed goals for the student group they've been identified for and has selected evidence-based strategies, including school-wide intervention, targeted interventions, extended learning, and enrichment. And this has really been led through a collaboration of district offices, and we together have developed a TSI guidance document to really support that goal and strategy development. And this guidance document is updated annually and reflects best practices and district resources available to the schools. And this is another piece of the work that we've been doing to support our schools that has been recognized by MSDE. And our guidance document has actually been shared statewide with other districts that have schools identified as TSI. But key to the work happening in TSI is that collaboration across offices and that direct support that's being provided to schools in the areas for which they've been identified. Janice?
Great, thank you, Lori Lynn. Next slide is just a summary that I think we've touched on throughout. What's coming next. So if we could have the next slide, please. You will see that we will be bringing the summer presentation to you all on May the 4th to really think about the data supports that need to be in place, the SEL comprehensive supports, the academic recovery acceleration and supports, as well as the tutoring partnerships. And then the team alluded to the fact that they have been planning ahead with several work groups across the district for looking ahead to school year 21-22 around ensuring the schedules are able to meet the core instruction as well as targeted learning from the data, aligning content and guidance for all learners, engaging stakeholder voice throughout this process, and continuing to leverage technology and resources to improve our instruction and engagement and utilizing those voices in a comprehensive way. So just want to say thanks to the team for hanging in there and getting through the presentation.
Thank you, Chief. Is there anything else? And thank you, Janice, for that also. Is there anything else before I end it over?
No, the only thing I was going to say is I know we've been short on time, so should questions come up, please send them to us because we know that there was a lot in that presentation and we're also mindful of time. So happy to engage in any follow-up questions as needed. You know, I do want to give a huge thank you to the team as well for the comprehensive work. It's hard to pick and choose. Our folks are really passionate about all of these areas, but I'm just grateful for the hard work that folks are trying to do in this responsive space right now of the pandemic. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And then certainly as we are moving forward, you know, these are words that are going to be reoccurring, you know, acceleration, remediation, recovery. Those words are going to be important because our young people are already, a lot of them are already at inequitable disadvantages, just generationally and systemically and even institutionally. So it's important that as we look at this work and as we're analyzing data and thinking about interventions, which I think we should have a deeper conversation about just that term intervention, because I think if there were interventions that were just stellar, we would be using them. But I think to the point that you all are making, it's the work, the ongoing responsive work that you're doing to identify gaps and needs and being responsive to those needs to make sure that our students are growing. So I appreciate that. Not going to hold you all any longer, but thank you for the work. And certainly we look forward to the end of the year presentation that will be coming soon. Procurement, I just want to lend to Commissioner Griffin, I believe, who is here. I think some folks may have had to step away, but Commissioner Griffin, did you have any questions about the procurement agenda today? And Jessica, I'd like to go through it that way.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not sure who was speaking. I can't see.
Oh, it's Commissioner Griffin. I had to step away from my laptop.
No worries. So I just wanted to know if you had any questions about the procurement agenda.
I did not have any questions.
Okay. There was something that came up, Jessica, about, I see that some of them, the MBE or WBE is limited or not applicable for any of these. Would you mind elaborating on that? I know that there may be some additional questions coming from the board around this. So for the sake of this meeting, would you mind elaborating slightly on that? I believe all three of these letters are that way.
Yeah, so all three of these board letters today have different reasons or rationale for how WMBE is approached. I don't know if there's anyone on from the legal team to give a more in-depth answer, but I'll give a broad overview of how that works. And then we can certainly have them follow up with specifics if you have additional questions. There are certain types of purchases that are exempt from WMBE based on what, like state law. There's also a review that happens for items that would be considered for WMBE to see if there are subcontracting opportunities built into the services that we're purchasing. So as an example, the interpreter contract, that review is an example of, they looked at it, we're buying the services directly from the interpreters. And so like that isn't one where there seemed to be an abundance of opportunities for subcontracting, as an example. In other situations when we're purchasing materials, there's actually exemptions in state law that allow, that basically say that that's not something that we do WMBE contracting for.
Okay. I mean, that is, I understand it, but I just know that there were commissioners that raised it. So you just may see that coming again. I understand the subcontracting based on what you just said, and the limited ability to do that in certain cases. I get it, but just as a heads up, be prepared to see some responses from, or some thoughts or questions from other board commissioners.
Okay, we'll take that back, and we'll also ask that there's a representative from the WMBE office that'll be able to take more those questions and answer in more depth.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much. Commissioner Griffin, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything additionally that you wanted to add before we adjourned. I think Commissioner Roberts had to step away.
No, there's nothing else that I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, and certainly I appreciate you and your time and your service on the committee already. And to the committee, thank you for staying, and to the staff, thank you all for staying over a few minutes today. We don't normally do it, but these were some pretty hefty presentations today, so I appreciate everyone's time. Our next meeting is on May the 4th. And the two items currently on the agenda are whole child office strategy and implementation update, and then also a science update. I just want to say to all of our assistant principals who may be out there watching or listening, we see you, we appreciate you, and our schools would not be running up, moving, or anything like that without you all being present. So happy Assistant Principals Week to all of our assistant principals who work tirelessly, who keep those ships moving. And we certainly just want to celebrate you this week, and certainly every week, but happy Assistant Principals Week to all of you out there. And without further ado, Christian, do we have anything additionally, or are we good to adjourn?
We are good to adjourn.
Have a great evening, everyone, and we will see you at our next meeting. Take care.